Okay. All right. We're here today with Roger Pressman, co-founder of EV Annex with two of his two sons, which is I think the leading Tesla aftermarket company out there, as far as I know. There are a handful of good ones that have been around for a while, but this is the biggest one I know of. Fellow Floridians, and they've been good friends of CleanTechnica for a while. We've had a lot of partnerships. Roger had, I forget, you can tell me what VIN number it was, but one of the very first Tesla Model S's in the world. And then had an early Model X, and then a early Model 3, now an early Model Y. So he's got, I think, about as good a perspective as you can get on comparing these vehicles. Also, since you are the lead engineer, I think, at EV Annex, designing aftermarket products for Tesla vehicles, you know them at a detail that I would guess perhaps only a handful of people outside of Tesla know them. So just your general overview of the Model Y compared to the other Tesla vehicles would be a good intro. I know you've written about it, but anything from that or since then that you really would highlight as
well, I guess it's a good question, but difficult because there's so many parts to it. But let me just kind of encapsulate the entire issue in a single word. I would say that word would be refinement. I have, as you correctly point out, Zach, owned and driven all four vehicles. The only one I really haven't owned, I've driven it, but I've never owned it, is the Roadster. So I think I have a pretty good feel for how the cars drive, how the cars are built, the build quality, the functionality within the cars, etc. And given all that, there's no question in my mind that Model Y represents a fundamental refinement for Tesla. And I think that's both impressive and a very good thing in the sense that they've learned lessons from each of the three cars that preceded Model Y and then integrated those lessons into Model Y. As a consequence, the car is really pretty impressive. We can talk about it from a lot of different angles. Number one, for those of you who haven't seen it in person, the car is much, much more impressive in person than it is either in video or in photos. I know that sounds kind of silly, but trust me when I tell you this, it has what is visually a wider stance, giving the car a more aggressive feel. It's obviously higher than Model 3. In fact, very often when I walk into my garage where I have parked at the moment a Model X, white, and a Model Y, white, I sometimes mistake which car I'm going to. They're really pretty close visually and close in stance and close in height. There's no question the X is bigger. I mean, I'm not suggesting that it isn't, but the cars are close. So refinement is the key word. And then you really have to move on to a variety of different topics that kind of address refinement. I don't want to filibuster here. We're such a small group that I'm happy to do this any way that Zach wants to do it. I can talk a bit about some of the characteristics or categories that I think are important, or I can address questions, or we can do a combination of them, whatever you guys want to do. But again, keep in mind, key word, key concept, refinement. And then beyond that, we can talk about specifics.
I think 5 to 10 minutes of you, sort of highlighting your things that stood out to you would be great, and then I'm sure people can ask questions about specifics. Regarding refinement, I'll just ask the question. That was something that shocked me with the Model 3 when I got in one. It seemed tremendously more refined than our 2015 Model S. That was like sort of like the big standout. Was like, whoa, this really improved across the board as a whole refined package. What can you say about the level, sort of going from a 2015 Model S to the Model 3 and then the Model 3 to the Model Y? How is that relative to?
Okay, first of all, just a mild correction. I went from a 2012 Model S to a 2020 Model Y, and have gone through a couple of different X's, a 2016 X, another 2018 X, and then a 2018 3, and then obviously this new Y. So how has the refinement occurred? Well, let's break it down this way. Relative to both the S and the X, the refinement is profound. It's profound, but based on interior hardware and also interior software capability. In terms of build quality, the refinement is profound. Build quality is much better, more thoughtful, and more, again, I'm using the word, sorry, refined. In terms of interior functionality and, you know, its exterior as well. Model Y aces both the S and the X, unquestionably. Let's take a couple of examples. Like the 3, the Model Y air conditioning HVAC system actually is a significant improvement. It's not even close. I will say, going off on a tangent for a moment, that Model Y's AC, along with Model 3's AC, frankly, is noisy, needs to be damped. It isn't, I think, up to the level that it should be, but I'm sure Tesla will work that out. But relative to its capability, its ergonomic interface, its ability to cool the car, I would say unquestionably it's a champ. Seats in Model Y are the same as Model 3, as we all know, but frankly, because they're up in the air a bit more, you have much better vision on the road, a much better capability, I think, for driving the car both safely and or aggressively. I am guilty of being a somewhat aggressive driver when it's safe to do so. And I will tell you that I drove the 3 for 2 years. I had a very early 3, drove it for just about 2 years. And it was as nimble, as good a driver's car as I could imagine at the price point. And I thought that when I would move to Model Y, I'd be giving up some things because, you know, after all, it's an SUV. The CG is just a little bit higher, the center of gravity. I figured it was going to be a bit of an issue. Turns out that there's very little driving difference between Y and 3, and I find that remarkable. Part of the reason is the stance is slightly wider. You have bigger tires. It holds the road remarkably well. It's a very nimble car for a crossover or an SUV or whatever, however you'd like to characterize it. It's a lot of fun to drive. Obviously, because I got an early one, I have a performance, so it is hellishly quick.
Now you're making me jealous, because the only thing I was like, well, I'm happy with my 3 because of how it drives so nicely, but you're making it sound like there's really.
I love. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I got a real kick out of driving it, and I gave it up grudgingly. But unfortunately, given our business, we have to have one version of everything. So I was the guy who got to get the newbie car. I have absolutely no regrets. The Y is, in an odd way, my favorite Tesla, and that's saying something. The S unquestionably is the most elegant of the cars, remains so to this day. It's a luxury car, or at least a premium car. Looks like it, drives like it. In the early days, turned an awful lot of heads. Now it's more common, so you don't get that as much. The X is just a generally cool SUV. Falcon wing doors are a showstopper, unquestionably. Even to this day, they tend to be a showstopper in some places. But, you know, that's not enough to really say the car is, you know, super duper. It's just kind of a very cool feature. But the X is extremely roomy, has an awful lot of cargo volume, is an outstanding vehicle. The 3, as I said, is a driver's car. And if you set it up right, it's an awful lot of fun to drive. But Y is also a driver's car. I think the guys who take the 3 to the track would have steam coming out of their ears saying, no, 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 it can't compete with my 3 on the track. And that's probably true. The Y, as I said earlier, has a higher center of gravity. There's no question that its cornering ability probably isn't quite as tight and as stable as a 3's, but just by a little. I wouldn't say it's remarkably different. I mean, you can move in and out of traffic, although frankly, I've I've had my Y for what we're pushing probably 5-6 weeks now, and there hasn't been a hell of a lot of traffic, unfortunately. I like Zach, live in Florida, so the state isn't totally shut down. We as a business have tried to keep our business open and have succeeded, frankly. But we're rotating staff, having people in at different times. The traffic, at least in my neck of the woods, is very light. So it's a little hard to judge the Y as I would in traffic on I-95 or even on a major street like in our area, something called Power Line Road. But the end of the day, it's a pretty cool driver's car. Drivability, there's absolutely no question in my mind that, again, this car is simply fun to drive. To go from point A to point B in this car is a lot of fun. And also, it's a practical car. I'm a DIY guy, always have been. My favorite store is Home Depot. I go there a lot. And you can put an awful lot of stuff in a Model Y. It's got substantial storage volume, substantial. And because it has a hatchback, putting things into the car, whether it's 2x4s or something else that's fairly large, is really a piece of cake. So, you know, I mean, my take of it is that each of the 4 Teslas now, not Cybertruck, but each of the 4 Teslas has their own advantages, as it were. But again, circling back to my favorite word of the day, Model Y represents the refinement in the product or model line, at least as I see it right now.
But yeah, so a couple of final questions from me, and then we'll go to everybody else. So just I was asking earlier about the level jump from Model S, Model X to Model 3 seemed really big to me. Is the level jump from Model 3 to Model Y similarly big, or is it more minor jump because so much is shared? Okay.
In many instances, it has to do with refinements that the consumer, that the average driver doesn't see. You know, things like going, for example, from resistive heating to a heat pump. Now, that doesn't affect me in Florida that much, but somebody who lives in, let's say, Connecticut, where it can, as I recall, get pretty cold in the winter. If you can save some range by using a heat pump to heat your car as opposed to resistive heating, that's a good thing. That's invisible to most consumers. They don't really see that. Those of you who've taken the time, and if you're a geek or an engineering geek like me, I would recommend you do take the time to watch Sandy Monroe's breakdown of the car. He points out dozens of improvements that are, again, pretty much invisible to the consumer, but represent substantial refinements. But going to your question, Zach, I would say no. The Model Y does not represent a step function improvement in Model 3. Most of the functionality, if not all the functionality, certainly all the software capability that you have in 3 is equally available in Y. There are some little things that represent improvements, but none of them would be what I would characterize as a major big deal. It's just small improvements that are, you know, kind of impressive. So I would say the big leap was from S and X to 3. A refined step would be from 3 to Y.
And so, you know, on the general level, I'm very happy to hear that the Model Y actually drives much more similar to the Model 3 than perhaps was assumed. On a personal level, it makes me want a Model Y more when I've got a Model 3 to pay off. But on the sort of broadest level, though, on that topic, if that's true that the Model Y drives very similar to the Model 3, especially in normal around town driving, I mean, how would you just talk about it compared to other vehicles in its class, other SUVs of that size? I mean, is there any real comparison to anything else on the market? I mean,
Well, I mean, I don't want to sound like an EV fanboy, although I guess I am. I've been involved in this now for going on 8 years, I guess, 9 years even. Uh, in my opinion, IMO, there really is no comparison. The smoothness of any well-constructed EV just blows away any of its comparable ICE counterparts. In terms of other EVs, for example, like the Jag or like the BMW, I'm sure they're competent cars. I really haven't test driven them, although I have seen them in person. Um, but range continues to be an issue for the majority of competitors right now. And also, there's another thing that I really don't like. I've spent some time with BMW, e-cars, and also Jaguar e-cars. And what they're trying to do, it seems to me, at least as of right now, is shove their current interior and exterior design philosophy, if you will, or design language, and kind of shoehorn an EV into that. So you have lots of interior buttons and knobs and unnecessary things and pop-ups, and it's just kind of forced in my view. That may be a little bit unfair, but that's my take of it. I am a minimalist kind of guy. I really love the minimalist interior that Tesla really came up with as part of the S design language, and has really maintained that to a very large extent through all of the other models, including obviously Model Y. It was funny. We did an event in Miami back in February, I guess, pre-COVID. So it was an actual event with real people in the normal kind of world. And we invited there were 600 or 700 people there. So it was a pretty cool event. And we invited Jaguar and we invited BMW and a couple of other vendors to show up, and they did. And it was interesting to see the reactions when now the Model Y wasn't yet available, okay? But obviously 3 was, S was, X was. And there are some people out there in the market who still want all the knobs and gewgaws and stuff that are inside a typical ICE vehicle, and therefore thought that the EV implementation done by Jaguar and BMW were very cool. A lot of the folks who already own Teslas or who were looking at Teslas thought it was busy and unnecessary. So I mean, obviously, different tastes for different people, and I respect that, and that's fine. But as far as I'm concerned, there really is nothing, my opinion, nothing at the price point with the capabilities that can compete with Model Y right now. That may change, but right now it's kind of singular. It's all by itself.
yeah, there are several objective measures where you just can say Tesla wins on this, or this. A lot of car buying is based on subjective matters of how much you like the look of the car, the brand, whatever. This has always been the case. I don't think that's going to change. I hugely prefer the minimalist design as well, but I understand that there are a lot of people who prefer these other designs. So it's good just to have the option so that people who want knobs and that stuff can have a different vehicle.
Absolutely.
My last question, and then everyone else is free to ask whatever you want, Roger. What are you wearing? This is
Oh.
What is
This is a shameless plug. No, we're obviously EV Annex is not a t-shirt shop. It's not what we sell. We sell a variety of different accessories for for all the Tesla models. But we just launched today, in fact, or at least popped it up on our website. We got a lot of requests for our Cybertruck T-shirts. We gave one or sold one, I'm sorry, at that big event. It sold out, and so we designed another one. So this is what it is. It's just a Cybertruck T-shirt. You can jump on our website and take a look if you like. That's all it is.